GDP is back again. Jim here.
And Jessica.
And we're here today to tell you why gardening with raised beds is just plain wrong. Or is it?
They're pretty popular.
They're very popular. Everyone's building them.
Except us.
We're not. And we're going to tell you why. Now, raised beds have a lot of benefits. Let's say you're where you get a crazy amount of rainfall, and the ground's just soaked. The raised garden beds can help raise it up out of the water so that it doesn't drown the plants.
It improves the drainage of the soil.
Raised bed gardens make it a little easier to pick.
Makes it easier to maintain and tend the garden, especially if you have some kind of physical condition where it's difficult to bend over.
Raised bed gardens can be great if you don't have soil or if your soil is incredibly poor.
Or there's some kind of weird toxic spill going on.
Toxic spills, am I right? Everywhere. And in that case, you have to bring in a bunch of soil and fill those raised beds.
And if you're in a cooler climate, having a raised bed, getting it up off the ground surface, it allows it to thaw quicker in the spring. So it could mean a little earlier planting. And depending on how the raised bed is installed, built, it could provide some protection from certain animals, getting it just up off the ground.
Now, a lot of these pros could actually be cons in certain instances.
It all depends on where you are and your situation.
Exactly. So you see a lot of people building raised beds, and they tell you to build raised beds. It's not always right in every situation. Okay, the raised bed gardens, it heats it up quicker, right? So if you're in a hot climate, you don't want that. That sun's gonna hit it, it's gonna bake that soil super quick.
It's more exposed.
Now remember, raised beds drain well. But if you're trying to retain moisture, if you're in an arid climate, you don't want that draining so fast.
Or if your soil is really sandy and the water just, drains through really fast. And if you're not, buying or building some kind of container for your raised bed, and you just have like a mound, you could save some money on materials, but you have the problem of that organic material kind of slumping off the sides. And with a raised bed, you could be having to add a lot more soil. So you either have to import a lot of soil or create a bunch of soil.
Anyone that builds raised beds knows what's the most expensive part of building a raised bed. It's going to be the soil that goes into it. Now, a lot of people take pride in getting certain components together and mixing their own super soil, but it's a big investment. It's a lot of input. And there are ways to avoid having to fill the whole raised bed with all kinds of soil. I mean, you could do hugelkultur, but that's besides the point. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about an alternative to raised bed gardening and why you might want to consider it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're talking about sunken beds. Y'all ever heard of that? You heard of that, Jess?
I've heard of it. And we can also call it a basin.
Now, again, sunken beds are not for everyone. It is especially important here in a hot, arid climate. Now, the idea behind the sunken bed is exactly the opposite of a raised bed. You're actually going to dig deeper and then plant in the basin.
So instead of going up, you're going down.
Yeah! There are a lot of advantages and disadvantages to this, and it's almost kind of opposite of your raised beds. Sunken beds are going to be great for water retention. Sunken beds will allow water to run through the landscape and then collect inside the basin, and it'll hold much more water there than, let's say, if it were flat especially if it's raised.
You can collect that water and hold it there longer.
Next, it's down lower, so depending on how you construct your sunken bed, it could actually provide a little bit of a wind block. So we're getting hit with a double whammy. Not only is it hot and dry, but that wind dries things out even faster. If we can get our plants lower than ground level, it's going to help protect it from the wind as well.
And if you have these berms or hills around your garden bed, it does provide a little bit of shade, which can also help keep things moist longer and cool the ground too.
Now, of course, these beds are sunken, so it's actually going to take advantage of the natural thermal mass already in the ground. So it's going to take a lot more to heat up that soil, and it'll stay cooler longer. Now, raised beds can be an investment. Spend a lot of money if you need materials to build it, soil to fill it, money. You know how much it costs to build a sunken bed? Could be $0. How great is that? Talking saving dollar bills, y'all. What? Yeah, so it's just a little bit of more elbow grease. That's the only payment. Digging those trenches, getting it planted, getting some organic matter in there. By the way, speaking of organic matter, it's also a great organic matter accumulator.
Because gravity.
Because gravity. Being low, it'll act as a trap to get that organic matter in there, trap it, get it into the soil. And that's what it's all about. Obviously, if you get a lot of rainfall per the year, don't do sunken beds, because it's just going to drown your plants.
But if you have a drier, warmer climate, or if you have periods of the year that maybe are drier, you might have a seasonal sunken bed.
And never forget, you can mix and match these. If you got the space, why not do a little bit of both and add some redundancy to your gardening system? Mixing up some of these techniques can be beautiful if it's appropriate. Another possible drawback, but I'm going to tell you a way around it, is having to possibly stoop down to tend the plants. But that might not always be the case. You can actually dig in between the trenches to get even lower, so your sunken beds can actually be at a decent height.
Raised sunken beds?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's a lot of digging.
My friend Alan at Custom Garden Solutions gave a tour of these sunken beds and it blew my mind. Well, I'll leave a link to that video down below. Go check that out because that's an amazing example of just a beautifully done sunken bed. We're not done talking about sunken beds. Nope, we're actually building sunken beds right now in the garden. Stay tuned. We are going to show you what we're doing in the garden, how we're constructing these sunken beds. It should be very exciting. We hope you enjoyed this episode talking about raised beds versus sunken beds. No matter what we say here, however you choose to grow your food comfortably, do that. Because that's really what's the most important here. A lot of growing methods out there. Do your research. Find out what works best for you. This has been a public service announcement from GDP. We're glad you joined us. If you enjoyed it, please give us a big thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, because we'd love to have you around. All right, we'll catch you in the next video, everyone. Bye. How's that? It's okay!